Welcome back, fiber friends. Today on my live, it was pointed out that there is no yarn drying on my yarn drying rack right now. And another one of our newer followers asked, why do you need to dry yarn? Why is it wet? Today, I wanted to talk about finishing yarn and go into more detail about some of the reasons we do what we do as spinners when we finish yarn. So once you've finished spinning your yarn and you're done plying it and it's almost ready to be used in a garment, your last step is going to be to soak your yarn in some water. Not only does wetting the yarn set the actual twist structure of your plying, it also reactivates some of the curl and twist that is naturally occurring in the wool fiber. Now, I'll be making a slowed down how-to step-by-step video of how to use a Niddy Noddy and measure your yarn, but you're going to end up putting it on a Niddy Noddy and measuring it both before and after it gets wet. Now, the reason you need to measure again after is because depending on the type of wool you use, it might have a higher or lower amount of crimp. And wool is a lot like human hair, so if you have someone who has really, really curly hair and you flat iron that hair, when it gets wet, all of that curl is going to return to it. So commercially processed fiber and even certain hand processed fiber will have certain curl and bounce return to the yarn once it gets wet, therefore changing the yardage. If you have a yarn that is made with something with a high crimp density, like this really beautiful Rambouillet sample I have here, when it's pulled straight and taut, it will be a certain length, but once it is again wet again and it's reactivated, it's going to shorten a bit. And actually, when I first measured this skein of yarn, it was initially 86 yards, and after being wet and re-dried, it ended up actually coming into about 80 yards. Now, not all fibers will do this, especially ones that are a lot lower crimp or have a lower bounce or squish factor to them. For this 100% Cotswold sample is a good example. I really didn't lose any yardage in this sample at all, but this sample doesn't have a ton of stretch to it, especially compared to something squishy and bouncy like this CBM. Now, you can opt to not wet finish your yarn. However, you have to keep in mind that once you do use that yarn in a project and it eventually gets wet, because it is clothing and you should be washing it, you might run into some unfortunate shrinkage or weird tensioning that results because the fibers are going to react to that water. Once again, some fibers definitely react a lot more dramatically to being wet than others, so do keep this in mind. However, I do recommend doing your own experimentation and just seeing for yourself just how different the yardage can be after the yarn has been wet.